Our employees have ideas. Sometimes they have a lot of them, and sometimes they're fantastic. But do we actually put the processes and systems in place to listen to them, to implement them? Because it can't be just about listening, it has to be about action too. My guest today's company actually is all about ideas management for the workplace. So let's get into the importance of those ideas and how we can start collecting them. Hold on. It's Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast. I'm Russel Lawlicker. Thanks for joining. I have to tell you, I'm going through a lot these days. Isn't it funny when you spend a large part of your life going, you know what, I need some change. I need a little bit, just a little bit of change would be nice. And then you get hit with the stick that just goes right across your face and goes, damn, that's a lot of change. I am going through that right now. Almost to the point where I'm like, I just want to put my feet on something that's not going to move for a little while. And actually, this podcast has been a really nice, zen, relaxed, something I can focus on, that I can sort of rely on and is reliable for me and how I create and getting guests. And it just feels like my safe space right now. And I don't mean my world is bad. Heaven forbid, it is not. It is anything but it is a lot of change. So for me to look at relationships at work as this sort of stable touchstone, I just want to thank you for coming along this journey with me on this thing I'm kind of proud of. And it's sort of been this nice thing that I can know that something I'm doing week to week, that this is a thing that I can invest my time, thoughts, creativity, heart, and love into. And I hope that shines and comes through in the conversations we have and some of the topics we dig into. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. So as I'm thinking, it kind of segues really nicely into our topic today, which is all about ideas and ideas management. Because I work with so many people, and sometimes they got lots of ideas. Sometimes they have ideas, but they're really not confident in sharing them because people might think they're stupid, or they just don't have the confidence in thinking it might be a good idea or not, or they're just not that kind of person that speaks up. My guest today, Will Reed, actually works for a software company that legit helps with that. It integrates into existing message boards and so forth that allows idea collection to sort of happen. He's going to hate the word collection that I used it, but management might be a better word. But it really allows point in time ideas and ways to share when you may not be normally feeling comfortable sharing at, say, a meeting or at an event, or just through the nature of your work. So I found this really interesting. The idea of not the technical side of it, but much more the people side of it, which is, what is a good idea? How do we listen to people? How do we take ideas and how do we action them? And what if we don't action them? How do we communicate that to staff? Oh, we get into all of it. So let's get over and talk to Will Reed. He's got a great accent too. I'll tell you that. He's coming out of the UK. Here we go. And on the show today is Will Reed, and here is why he is awesome. He is the founder and CEO of Sideways 6, a service to build better businesses through employee ideas, and he's the host of The Ideas Show, a podcast about ideas that change the world and the people that might make them happen, or do actually make them happen. Hello, Will.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm a big fan of listening to employees and doing it for the betterment of an organization. And I don't know if we do that enough. So really excited to dig into this. But I can't get into any of that, Will, without asking you the first question, which is, what's your best or worst employee experience?
So my best or worst felt like the worst,
okay,
probably for about 10, 20 minutes, and then turned out to be the best in that it was pretty transformational. It was actually a one-on-one experience with an ex-manager of mine, and we were going to see a potential customer. And I was with him, my manager, at about 4 p.m. and I showed him this presentation. I excitedly showed him this presentation that I had for us both to kind of deliver and go through the next day at 10 a.m. with this potential customer. And he looked at it he kind of flicked through the PowerPoint deck, and he turned to me and he went, "This is terrible." And he said it with a smile on his face and a glint in his eye. And we had a great relationship. And he said, "You can do so much better than this. And I know that you have not put enough into this." And truth be told, I hadn't. I was quite early on in my career. I thought that I could probably kind of wing it and make it up a little bit more than was the right thing to do. And he gave me some pretty specific feedback around, like, look at this, like this part is really not up to scratch for this reason, and I really think you could do so much more on this part. And he said to me, "I'll be on that train with you at 8:30 tomorrow morning." And he's just said, "I'm really interested to see what this looks like by that point." And because, on reflection, because we had a great relationship, because I knew that he kind of cared about me and wanted the best for me, and because it was so direct but delivered with a smile, I went home and I fixed it. I sorted it out. I put a lot of pride into it. There is a happy ending in that we won the customer, but that's always stuck with me on the power of, like, really being fairly direct whilst very, very caring. And obviously it all kind of matched up when the whole Radical Candor book came out, and I was like, yeah, I've had that experience, but it stuck with me. It's an experience that shaped how I chose to work. I kind of lets up the care that I'm putting into things. It's definitely shaped how I manage, and it's a kind of story that stuck with me. So that would be my best experience that maybe felt like the worst whilst I was in the moment.
You had some time to marinate on it a bit and realize that it was all for your best interest.
Exactly. And we remained good friends afterwards, and I've shared the story with him. He didn't really remember it, so it was obviously not quite as pivotal for him.
It's always funny because people don't realize the impact they have on others. They're just going about their work for good or for bad. And then we find out, like, decades later that was such a pivotal moment for their coworkers, employees, leadership, where they're still dealing with the trauma of it, or they're still, using that as an influence or a motivator in their own work.
100%. We can have these huge influences on each other. I've definitely experienced that when you first become a manager and you start to realize that your kind of little actions, or how you're showing up in the office, or when you seem super excited, that's giving everyone else loads of energy. And when you seem a little deflated, that's actually people are starting to worry or take a bit of notice of that. And I think it's such an interesting point.
So let's get into the idea collection space, which is where where a big part of your time and efforts are focused on.
Absolutely.
So employee ideas, collecting them, actioning them.
Mm-hmm.
So strategy 6 helps collect that information. So I want to get into the idea and the philosophy of it. Why did you think gathering employee ideas had a problem to fix?
Yeah, sure. So I've had the experience, I'm not sure if you have, of being a small fish in a large pond, or a small cog in a big machine, whatever the analogy you want to use, working at a really big organization and not feeling particularly connected to what you're doing. And I think that lack of connection can happen through a couple of things. It could be that you actually just don't really care too much about the mission or the purpose of the organization. If that's the case, you probably want to have a look at finding a new role potentially. But it could be that actually you buy into the overall picture, i.e. why we're all here. You buy into we are making people's lives better in some way through the product or service that we're delivering. But just at the moment, what the organization is trying to do in the short to medium term, it's either not resonating with you, or you don't feel like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis has a particular link to that, or you don't feel consulted, or you don't feel like you're contributing to the change that's supposed to be happening around you. And I've definitely had that. I worked at a media company at the beginning of my career, and had that experience of kind of interacting with people that had interesting insights, right? So our customers, our suppliers, I was interacting with colleagues every day, and we all had these ideas about what to do. Like, we had these ideas about how we might be a little bit better, but we didn't really understand the context that the organization was trying to play in, because we were quite low level people early on in our careers, as I say. And there was this mismatch where the organization desperately wanted to get buy-in into the short to medium term picture, desperately wanted to engage people around that, but it wasn't doing a good job because I didn't really know what that medium-term picture was, let alone feel like I was a part of it. And I was yearning to be a part of something because I had enough engagement to have the insights, to have the ideas that I wanted to contribute somewhere. And that's where Sideways 6 came from. It's that experience of thinking, well, people have ideas, right? We talk about ideas about how to improve the place that we work for our customers, for ourselves, for the world all the time. We talk about it in the back of taxis on the way to customers. We talk about it in the bar on a Friday with our friends. We talk about it wherever it might be. And organizations, and at the very top, if you were to ask people, do you want to listen? Do you want to hear people's ideas? Do you want to be a culture where ideas are shared? They do, but there's something going wrong in the middle. And we set out to fix that something going wrong in the middle. And it's from personal experience, and then started Sideways 6 8 or 9 years ago, and started to speak to organizations and start to work out where the challenge was. And it turns out it's not quite as easy as I probably thought when I thought, right, I'll just fix it then. And there's all these kind of intricacies. But when you get it right, when you are able to run employee ideas programs that are impactful, when you are able to harness that kind of collective insight, the collective excitement behind the things that you're actually trying to achieve as an organization, magic can happen.
So you kind of breezed over it there. What is an ideas program?
Yeah, so an ideas program essentially is just a structured way of engaging employees in a subject. So that subject might be something that's very important to you in the long term, like your purpose or your mission. How do we speed up the achievement of our purpose? How do we make sure that we are living in the world as an organization as we want it to be? It could be something much more topical and short term. So how are we going to hit this quarter's targets? How are we going to fend off this recession? How are we going to capitalize on this market trend? Or it could be something more in the medium term. So we see a lot of ideas programs around, say, sustainability. But broad strokes, you are making a commitment to engage employees around their ideas. We actually try and avoid the use of the word kind of collect and gather, because what we want is for our employees to be set a challenge or a theme, and then to put their ideas forward, and then to have the excitement to help to bring their own ideas to life. An ideas program is basically a commitment to do that. It's a commitment to put some resource behind it. It's a commitment to evaluate those ideas fairly. It's a commitment to bring some of them to life.
How do you convince an organization to even start an ideas program being of value to invest in to begin with?
Yeah, so I mean, there's three main benefits. So what can happen when you talk about this whole space is people can think back to the dusty suggestion box in the corner of a kind of restaurant or something like that, or it can. Then that's the kind of one of the worst things that can be associated with this space, where you ask people their ideas and then nothing happens, and it was all a big waste of time. And did we even need to spend money on that box in the first place? And the second thing that can happen is you can think back to efforts where people actually have earnestly gone out and tried to listen to employees' ideas, and then they've been a bit overwhelmed. So it's like, we got loads of ideas, we didn't know what to do with them. Actually, it turned out we thought we were going to get loads of good ideas. Actually, none of them were implementable. And so you're always battling against that. So it's often not just that they haven't thought about doing it, but it's that they've thought about doing it and thought, no. But there are three main kind of big benefits to companies who take this seriously, to organizations who take this seriously. And they are, the first one is the most obvious one. So if you do it well, if you set the brief well, if you make sure that you are aiming this at something that the organization cares about and that employees know about and that employees care about, then you're going to get a bunch of ideas that you can actually implement. It turns out that the people speaking to customers all day long on a retail shop floor have some insights about how the shop could be better for customers, like who knew? Or it turns out we work a lot with kind of airlines, or we work a lot with like utilities companies. If you're out speaking to customers in their homes whilst you're fixing their boiler, you're going to find out some pretty interesting stuff about what they want. Or if you're kind of speaking to people at the check-in desk, you're going to have some ideas about how that check-in process could be better. So first off, you're going to get a bunch of ideas that you can implement. And wherever you point this program, if you do it well, it doesn't matter, you're still going to get those ideas. So whether it's an innovation piece, a sustainability piece, a saving money piece, whatever it might be. You'll notice that I'm not really talking about super general ideas programs, because they are the 5%. We would almost always suggest that you don't start off with them. So the first benefit is you'll get those ideas, and that might lead to new revenue streams, better customer experience, save costs. But the less obvious, well, the second one is somewhat obvious as well, is that it feels good to be heard. It feels good to be listened to. That experience that I talked about, the company that I worked at, I was less engaged with the company. I was having a worse experience because these things were bubbling up and there was nowhere for them to go, even if they were not good, even if actually someone just listened to them and went, hey, we can't do that for this reason. It's still a much more engaging experience, and you feel like you've been heard than if no one's asking. But the third one, and actually for me the most exciting benefit, and how you convince companies to go on this journey to start listening to ideas, is that you are engaging people and creating shared ownership of the things that you want to happen, those goals. There's this thing called the IKEA effect in employee engagement, which we've come across here, but the endowment effect before it's applied to, before it got this kind of catchy name, which is that we value more the things that we help to create. So you've got a set of drawers that you spent a few hours from IKEA building versus the exact same set of drawers that's been built by someone else. You're going to want the ones that you've kind of endowed into, that you have helped to build. And we can actually leverage that when we're thinking about any change that we're trying to make happen in a large organization. And so that's the real third benefit, is what if you could, instead of saying to people, hey, we need to be more innovative, you say to them, we are looking to be more innovative as a company. Together, how can we do that? How can we build this innovation culture together? Or if you want to say, hey, we need to be more prudent because there's a recession coming, say, right, here's 5 themes in ways that we can be more efficient. What's our strategy? What are your ideas for how we can get there? And then people are going to, just outside of the ideas program, they're going to feel a sense of ownership over that goal that you're trying to achieve. So to me, that's actually the most interesting benefit.
So you do talk about bringing those ideas forward and the benefits that are them. And I get it. I totally agree with all the benefits, but I also see a bit of a difficult part of this, which is, how does an organization define what a good or a bad employee idea is? Because employees are going to share, and then that's in the eye of the beholder sometimes. So being listened to, we get into a difficult situation for a lot of people.
Listen, you're absolutely right, and there's a few things to touch on there. The first is, as I say, is you don't want to go super general. So we once started working with a company where they actually had run an ideas program without us, and they'd launched it, and they basically just said to people, hey, we want your ideas, full stop. Or what are your ideas for how we can be better, full stop. And that's so ill-defined, that's so fluffy, that's so open to interpretation, that so many people can go forwards excitedly and say, here's my idea, and they can really believe that it's a good idea, but you don't have a shared understanding of what a good idea is. And so what they got on day one, they had the most liked idea, the most kind of supported idea amongst colleagues, was to put an ice cream machine in the corner of the office. And of course, as a large utilities company that's running on a low margin, it's very unlikely they're going to put an ice cream machine in the corner of the office. But who can blame the person for putting that forward? Because through the prism of, would this make employees happier, or would this make a cool office, that's a good idea. Through the prism of, is this actually going to help our business? Is this going to help drive value for our customers? That's a terrible idea. So first off, you have to set a clear kind of challenge. And in their case, what they should have done is said, here's what we care about. Here's where we're trying to get to. What are our ideas to get there? And the second thing that story brings up is that you need to give a clear prism through which you're going to evaluate these ideas, right? So that's quite a common one, is to say, does this benefit the customer? Is it achievable within a few months? Is it proof of conceptable within a couple of weeks? And does this fit in with the values that we live within this organization? And then it's about, well, what happens if you get an idea that's deemed not good? Well, actually, one of the other things that I would bring up there is to make sure that, as well as a consistent kind of prism that you're looking at and evaluating these things through, is to look at having the right kinds of people that are making these decisions, and ideally having a diverse group of people that are making these decisions. So rather than feeling like those people in the ivory tower are going to make the decisions on the ideas. You might get a small group of kind of reviewers. You might include actually a frontline colleague. You might include a middle manager. You might include a director in those decision making. So it feels much more fair and representative and kind of diverse in the people that are making these decisions. And then finally, it's about being super transparent about why these decisions were made. So there's a very big difference between being told no to your idea or getting some horrible automated email that goes out to all 300 people that have contributed saying, sorry, on this occasion, we're not taking your idea forwards, and actually receiving something which is considered transparent and feels fair. So an example might be, I put that ice cream thing forward, and in this example, the company's set the challenge quite clearly that we're trying to create an organization which delivers amazing value for our customers and lives to a set of values that we believe in. I might be able to kind of, in theory, reject that idea, which sounds really harsh and horrible. But actually, I might be able to say, hey, really appreciate this. And we think if money was no object, this would be a super cool feature for our office. On this occasion, as we're looking at ideas that are going to really move the needle for our customer, this isn't something that we're going to prioritize. And it like, for example, like it scored, and it actually scored a 2 out of 5 on that metric, and it scored a 2 out of 5 on that metric. But please do keep contributing. It's a very different experience.
Communication is key to really understanding why some get through and some don't. My worry sometimes, though, and I was checking out Strategy 6 a bit, and it was talking about how it's helped implement millions of ideas. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Get millions of ideas, but only implement thousands. So if somebody reads that, they're seeing an exceptionally big gap of you're listening, but you're not, like my dad always says, right? You're not listening to me. But what my dad's interpretation of you're not listening to me is you're not doing what I'm telling you to do. Those are completely two different things, right? No, I heard you. I'm just not going to do what you told me to do because it's not right for me, not right for whatever. So how do you tackle that gap from a communication standpoint? Because I get what you're saying, but that is a significant gap from listening to doing.
On average, around about 1 in 30 ideas is implemented. So the gap is large. It's definitely not 100% of ideas being implemented, but it's not super low. And then that number goes up the more you define a specific challenge that you're aiming at. And the cold hard reality is that organizations are focused on something, and that is going to bubble up to the top. Now, the best organizations are obviously focused on long-term purpose, a long-term mission, and therefore you are going to get more, like there's going to be more space for innovative ideas, right? So it may be that this idea does not specifically save us X percentage in this region, in this space of time, but it helps us hit our purpose and our mission, and there should be space for those ideas. So it's not just the case that, hey, we know the exact ideas before we even launch this. We know the ideas that we want. And if you don't give us those ideas, then get lost. It's definitely not the case. You should be creating space for the small wins, the medium-term wins, and the long-term stuff. There's almost like a scale, right? There's a scale from we are not listening, we're not consulting, we don't even care what you think, all the way to some kind of self-organizing company where people get to decide everything that they work on, and it's totally democratic. It's called a holocracy, that type of thing, where it's like you decide everything. And what I would say is that employee ideas definitely doesn't take you all the way there, and I understand that, and I think it's really interesting to look at what's taking you all the way there. But we're certainly, by running employee ideas programs, you're involving people and you're listening to people more than if you don't ask them anything. Because of the nature of like a mechanism of an idea, you're listening to them more. It creates a lot more ownership than just a survey where you're just saying, what do you think about this thing? And you're not giving any space for like someone to take the initiative or someone to suggest a response to that. And then we're probably a step up, which is the kind of 75% of the way there, which is like, okay, we want you to come up with the actual things that we will do, not just asking how you feel about some things that we pre-decided. But I think it's an interesting question, which is like, how do you go even further? How do you get to the point? And we're starting to think about that. Like, how do you get to the point where instead of suggesting, it's almost like you're just surfacing an idea and then you're being allowed to work on it, or you go and get to work on it, and maybe people ask you how it's going. And I think that's a really interesting kind of part for the future.
What if you don't get enough ideas?
It's a big thing, and there's a bunch of things that you can do around communication and making sure that you make it as easy as possible for people to engage. And what the suggestion box in the corner of the office or the restaurant got right is being where people are, right? So it didn't ask you to go out to, I don't know, like if you're working in the office, it didn't ask you to walk all the way to the warehouse or to the back of the parking lot to put your idea forwards. It was there. It was when you were walking to the bathroom or the cafeteria, like you are dropping something in. And I think you need to kind of think about that principle when you're trying to engage people. It got a lot of things wrong as well, don't get me wrong, but you need to think about that principle when you're trying to think about making sure that you get the right volume of ideas and get the right volume of engagement, is to be where people are. So how can you make it as easy as them texting their idea in, or slacking their idea on a Slack channel, or sending it off on a Teams app is super key. Outside of that, there's a bunch of like pretty standard change management stuff that you want to do to engage people. One of the things though is that you often, if you're an organization where this type of thing feels a bit foreign, where this type of thing feels like, oh, we don't speak up around here, this isn't our culture, and I think you have to be quite ready at the beginning for some skepticism. You have to be quite ready for people to say, no, you don't really listen. You don't really care about listening, and that is going to lead to lower engagement. And you have to almost be ready for it, and you have to basically take whatever you can get to start off with, and like really listen to the people who put their ideas forward, because they're going out on a limb. They are going against the kind of the grain or what they expect of the culture. You need to celebrate those people. You need to take their ideas very, very seriously, and ideally, you need to get to a point where you have those success stories, where you have the example of like, hey, I know there's skepticism here, I get it, but we are really listening. Like, this idea was put forward from the front line, and it now has come to fruition, and it's now like out there, and build up from there.
What is the right number? You mentioned having, the right amount of engagement, the right number of questions or ideas. Is there a magic number of, hey, if you get 30 ideas this month, that's considered successful? Is there a metric for that?
We kind of talk about all other things being equal, more engagement is better, pretty much without a limit. But of course, usually all other things aren't equal. And a lot of the time, getting significantly more engagement comes at the expense of some other very important things, like the quality of the ideas, like the thoughtfulness that's gone into putting them forwards, like how actually kind of actionable they are. Mainly the thoughtfulness, to be honest, right? If you just say, hey, we need like 5 words for your idea, and you don't need to think about the problem it's solving, and you don't need to think about this, that, and the other, then you're going to degrade the quality. But I don't see why. Like, there's a brilliant book called The Idea-Driven Organization, which kind of posits that you can actually run a whole organization based on this like currency of ideas, and it wouldn't all be going through the type of programs that we're thinking about all the time. Like, some of it is just around giving people the space to work on their own ideas in response to goals, and making sure that people have that resource and time in order to work on their ideas. But I don't think there's really a limit to if the ideas are helping to contribute to what you're trying to achieve as an organization, and if the ideas are coming from a great place from the employees, and if the ideas are ones that employees really care about, I don't think there's an upper limit.
I was noticing of your software as an integration tool within existing platforms.
Yeah.
Those existing platforms are very public on who you are and what you do. Anonymity has always been something that people really enjoy because of the particular culture within the organization, which I've always said is a canary in a coal mine, is that you have a problem with your culture if the only ideas or criticisms you get are from anonymous sources. This kind of takes away the anonymity, which can be not great for a lot of safe spaces within an organization. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually agree with you now, and it's taken me a while to agree with you. I think I used to be very pro. This should all be public. If you can't do it publicly, you've got a problem. This can be the start of a change, etc., etc. And I still believe some of that. Well, I still believe it to an extent. But I think what I've realized over the years is that there should be space for people who don't feel as comfortable speaking up, who don't want their profile picture next to a suggestion that they've made, because it's not always the sign of a bad culture. It might just be someone who's a little more introverted. It might be someone who, it might be the same people who struggle to like speak up in meetings because they're a little more nervous. It's just not the way that they operate, and we want to give them space to contribute as well. So we actually, you're right in saying that our default is public, but we've actually introduced the ability to do this anonymously as well, because of that. Because I think there should actually be space for those people who, for whatever reason, don't want to be so. I'm quite like a outgoing guy. Like I don't mind like kind of speaking my mind, doing it publicly. That's not the case for everyone. I think it's quite important when you're thinking about building these types of platforms and systems that you take into account different perspectives and you take into account different levels of appetite. And that's been really interesting, because I think when you speak to CEOs and leaders of these large organizations, the initial reaction to, hey, you should introduce an anonymous channel is like, that's just going to be complaints. That's just going to be everyone saying, I hate this thing and I hate that thing. And do we really want to create that negative culture? But it's really interesting that doesn't play out. That's not what we see from our data. There's a little bit of that, don't get me wrong, but there's a little bit of that publicly, to be honest, because we all know people who are more than happy to speak up negatively publicly as well. But what it is as well is there's people that are maybe afraid that they're saying the wrong thing, or they're afraid that they might get mocked for their idea and things like that. And so giving them that space is really key.
Yeah, and I'm always curious how technology takes into account diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging when it comes to how it's going to be able to be communicated, but also implemented. So thanks for that.
I think it's a really key thing.
What has been some of the benefits you've seen? I mean, you use the ice cream machine as an example, but you're in this space. You've been in this space for years. What are some examples or a story you can share with me that's like, no, this is how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, so listen, I mean, I think some of the exciting stuff at the moment is around sustainability, and around, obviously, organizations have woken up to the fact that they need to reduce their negative impact on the world or start making a positive impact on the world. And we can talk about why they've woken up to that. And it may be that it's purely financial and shareholder pressure, or maybe the goods of their hearts, but they have woken up to it, and they understand now that that needs to be the case. And of course, to make anything happen, as I've talked about a little bit, you have to get people on board, especially if you're an organization of 100,000 people. You need a good deal of them on board with that message and contributing to that message in order to make your result happen. So let's say you're aiming for net zero within 5 years. That's not going to happen if people don't know or don't care about that goal. And so some of the exciting stuff is actually the collective and just how many people. I mean, we work with organizations of 20, 30,000 people where they've managed to engage over 50% of those people across the course of a year in a particular goal. But then there are a bunch of stories that still amaze me. We work with one organization where someone basically suggested that their vans out on the highways should be limited from, I think they were currently limited at I'm going to get these numbers wrong. I think they may be limited at 70 miles an hour, and they should be limited at 68 miles an hour, because they worked out that the cost efficiency and the saving on gas would be noticeable for a single vehicle, but across the whole fleet that would make a huge difference. And actually, they worked out that the timing difference on an average journey we're talking like minutes or less than. And so that idea went up and got implemented, and that saved. It's kind of like a win-win-win, because it saved a hell of a lot of kind of gas from going out into the ozone layer and into the atmosphere, which is obviously great for the environment, but it's also saved a hell of a lot of money for the organization. And it's those type of kind of win-win-wins that we like to see. A kind of more of a fun one was we worked with British Airways over here in the UK, and for their 125-year anniversary, they ran a campaign called the Best of British, where it was like, what are your ideas on how we celebrate being kind of one of these kind of best of British brands? And someone said, well, another best of British brand is Brewdog, the brewers. Said, why don't we do a collaboration beer? And that idea got kind of picked up, and hundreds of thousands of customers have now drunk that beer on board British Airways flights. It's led to a long partnership between the two brands. And it's just quite a cool example. The reason I like that one is because it's so physical. Because every time now someone gets on a flight and they're offered that beer, that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for that member of the cabin crew kind of putting their hand up and saying, "Hey, how about this? Here's my idea." So you have all sorts of things, from the mundane and the boring that makes a big difference, through to the like super exciting, where the difference is a little bit less quantifiable, but kind of you can tell it through the feeling in the story.
I got to go back to what you started with the organizations are now suddenly realizing that employees have something to say. They've got this new woken up ability, which again is so frustrating. And I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, which is this whole, the pandemic happened. Organizations suddenly realized employees have more power than they thought they did. And they realized that the way of business needs to change. Even though we've known this for decades, it suddenly, the pandemic made it everybody else aware about it. So how has that impacted the world of ideas?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a big surge in people interested in doing this because of things like the Great Resignation. Obviously, if employee engagement goes up, retention goes down, and so this is a driver of employee engagement. And so you do see a lot of that. One word of caution, I guess, is that very successful programs can be led by the head of people or the head of employee engagement or the head of comms. Just need to make sure that you can do something with those ideas, right? So we talk about the topics, and so that's one of the things that we kind of speak to these engagement focused folks who are speaking to us now. We just make sure that, like, if you're going to run this, you need to make sure you actually bring these ideas to life. You need to make sure that you're actually doing something about this. This is not a survey that you can sweep under the rug if you need to. Once you've kind of shown the graphs, this is something where you have to show tangible action. So it definitely has created a big swell in organizations wanting to listen to employee ideas and to bring in, but we just need to caution them that it's not just about the listening, it's about the making sure that things happen, making sure that change happens as a result of it.
And the importance of the communication too, as you've already illustrated. We're hearing you. Here's why we might not be doing what you've done, but we don't want to discourage further ideas.
Exactly.
Lack of action
100%.
And lack of communication can just be a poison to a culture anyway.
100%.
So I've got to ask you the big question here, which is, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work, Will?
So for me, it's to take this phrase of what do you think when you're consulting on something, and to think about, at least some of the time, changing that to what do you think we should do within a set framework. To move just from feedback. Feedback's so important, right? There's a massive space for feedback and consultation, but also to create space for that to be active as well. So not just what do you think, but what do you think we should do? Turn those maybe passive conversations into active conversations. And you can do that on a tiny scale in a one-to-one, or you can do that on a massive scale with a big employee ideas program.
Thank you, Will. That's Will Reed. He is the founder and CEO of Sideways 6 and the host of the Ideas Show. Thanks so much for being here, Will.
Thank you.
And that was another episode of Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast. If you love what you just heard, if you've loved all the episodes, every single one of them, right? There's not a few you didn't. No, of course not. They're all lovely. Needless to say, if you like the podcast, I would love it if you'd leave a rating, a review, a little bit of love, maybe share the episode with friends, coworkers, leaders that you think would get a lot of value out of it. I'd love for you to pass it along, or give a little bit of love on those directories where those ratings and reviews matter. Again, thank you for your time. I love talking with you. Take care.